They replaced me in the family portrait. Literally. One day my face was there, next it was gone, cropped out like I'd never existed. No message, no mistake, just erasure. But when my sister's empire started crumbling, guess who they called to fix it? Let me tell you a story about being erased and what happens when the quiet one keeps the receipts. The last time my mother said my name with softness, I was 16. After that, it was mostly instructions, or silence. My sister Savannah, she shined. The favorite, the brand. I was the quiet one, the background blur. Until she built a business using everything I ever created, and said it was hers. They called me bitter, said I was overreacting. But then the internet found the truth, and the same family who once erased me showed up at my door, asking for help. This is what happened when I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead. The laughter from the living room didn't sound like joy, it sounded like performance. Ray Donovan stood just past the kitchen threshold holding a chipped ceramic mug she'd reheated 3 times. The tea had long since gone cold. Her fingers curled tighter around the handle more out of habit than warmth. On the oversized cream sectional, Savannah, her younger sister by 4 years, posed beneath the white halo of a ring light. Her voice was bright, her tone polished, too polished. 50,000 guys, can you believe it? Thank you for being part of the Donnaverse. Savannah beamed at the camera, her glossed lips glinting like armor. You're my tribe. Their mother, Marianne, sat next to her, nodding along with a smile that belonged more to a proud campaign manager than a mom. Greg, their father, lingered behind them in his recliner, half present, flipping through the channels with the volume off. Not once had Ray's name come up. She hadn't expected it to. Lately, Ray had become skilled at existing just out of frame like a production assistant on someone else's show. The house smelled like cinnamon potpourri and forced enthusiasm. Her mug felt heavier in her hand, suddenly ridiculous. She should have gone back to the guest room, the one her parents let her use, until she got back on her feet as if the floor beneath her had collapsed by choice. But she didn't. Then the screen flickered. A brief pause. A glitch. Maybe the Wi-Fi dipped. Maybe the lamp cord shifted. Savannah's face changed in an instant. Her cheerful mask cracked just for a moment, long enough to reveal something sharper underneath. Oh my God, not now, she snapped. Why does this always happen when you're around? Ray blinked. What? She asked softly, not expecting an answer, but needing to mark her own presence. You throw off my energy, Savannah hissed, rising to adjust the camera. You're like a walking glitch. Ray looked to her parents. Marianne set her wineglass down and stood, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. She's not wrong, she said calmly. Every time something goes right for Savannah, you somehow manage to ruin it. Ray swallowed. The mug trembled just slightly in her hand. Greg didn't say anything. He just rubbed the bridge of his nose like this whole moment was giving him a headache he'd had before. The silence that followed felt like a verdict. But Ray didn't cry, didn't yell. She just stood for a moment longer, as if waiting for anyone to challenge the absurdity of what had just happened. No one did. She turned away. Her room, the guest room technically, was down the hallway past the dining nook with the outdated family photos. Ray paused at one for a beat, the portrait from when she was 16. She remembered that day how her dress had wrinkled in the back seat, how Savannah had insisted on standing in the middle, how the photographer had told Ray to tilt her chin just a little more until she felt like her neck might snap. In the photo, she looked out of place, like she'd wandered into someone else's family by accident. The door to the guest room stuck before it opened with a reluctant creak. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and the kind of air freshener that lost its scent years ago. The sheets on the bed were tucked too tightly, hospital corners, and all like no one actually expected someone to sleep here, just visit. She moved quietly, almost automatically. One by one, she packed socks, jeans, her old college hoodie, a worn paperback with dog-eared pages, a spiral notebook half filled with lesson plans from a tutoring job she hadn't had in over a year. No framed photos, no letters, no nostalgia. She didn't need memories. Not tonight. She zipped the bag, slung it over her shoulder, paused. In the doorway, she waited for the sound of her name. A call, a question, anything. Nothing came. She stepped out into the hallway, past the room still glowing with artificial joy, past the house she used to belong to, and out the front door. The street was quiet, dipped in the kind of darkness that clings to the edges of streetlights. It was fall, maybe early November. The air held that crispness Ray usually loved, the kind that hinted at cinnamon donuts and flannel sheets. But tonight, it just felt like absence. 2 blocks away, the corner gas station buzzed under humming fluorescents. She bought a granola bar and a bottle of water. Not because she was hungry, out of habit, out of something like muscle memory. "Bus still run this late?" she asked the tired-eyed cashier. "Last one's in 8 minutes," he mumbled, not looking up. "If he's on time?" He wasn't. But Ray waited anyway. She sat on the cold metal bench coat pulled tight around her backpack, tucked between her feet like a lifeline. Her phone didn't buzz. Her screen didn't light up. No one called after her. She wasn't missed. She wasn't needed. And maybe that was the clearest truth she'd seen in years. When the bus finally arrived, creaking and wheezing to a stop, she climbed aboard. The driver didn't ask where she was going. No one on the bus looked at her. And for the first time that night, that anonymity felt like kindness. She didn't look back through the window. There was nothing left to see. The motel room key had the number scratched off and rewritten in red marker. Room 6. Ray pushed the door open and the smell hit her before the light did an uneven mix of old cigarettes, bleach, and curtains that hadn't been truly dry in years. The wallpaper was a faded yellow with tiny blue flowers, curled slightly at the edges. The carpet crunched, faintly underfoot, stiff with age and something she didn't want to name. She dropped her backpack by the foot of the bed. The mattress let out a sound half sigh, half protest under the weight of her as she sat down. No one knew she was here. No one had asked where she was going. She didn't turn on the TV. The noise felt like a lie she wasn't ready to tell herself. Instead, Ray pulled her phone from her coat pocket. The screen lit up her face in the dimness. No missed calls, no messages, not even a spam notification, but there was one alert. A silent reminder from 2 years ago resurfacing like a ghost package delivered monogrammed handkerchiefs. Gift for Marianne Donovan. Ray stared at it, unmoving. She remembered everything about that gift. The effort it had taken to afford it. The long nights tutoring students online for $12 an hour. The carefully chosen pale blue silk. The hand-stitched initials M.D. The note she had folded into the box with it, wrapped in the same care she used to wrap birthday cards as a child. She hadn't written to her mother in years, but that year she had tried. "If there's still a space in your heart for me, I'd like to sit there again. I'm not asking for everything, just a small seat at the table. I miss Tuesday mornings. I miss you." She'd paid extra for tracking. Watched the delivery confirmation, waited, telling herself maybe, just maybe, it would start something soft again between them. It never did. Marianne never mentioned it, never said thank you, never asked if Ray had meant the words. Ray had told herself for a while that maybe her mother had misplaced it, that maybe the timing had been wrong, that maybe it had simply been forgotten. But this push notification 2 years later was proof of something quieter and colder it had been received. And unopened. Not thrown away, not destroyed, just ignored. That kind of silence screamed louder than words ever could. Ray sat there in the dim motel room, the hum of the fridge the only sound besides her own breath. She wondered how many other things she'd sent into her mother's world over the years that had landed just as quietly. Birthday calls that went to voicemail. Texts that got one-word replies. Stories she used to share in person, then by phone, and eventually not at all. She leaned back against the wall, feeling the slight chill from where the plaster had thinned behind the peeling paint. Her eyes wandered to the ceiling where a brown water stain had spread like a bruise, wide and shapeless. There had been a time when Ray thought bruises only came from impact. She'd since learned that sometimes they came from absorption. Quiet absorption of words never said, acknowledgments never given, and love rationed like it cost something. She remembered being 11 making scrambled eggs one morning before school. Savannah had broken a glass, and when Marianne came rushing in, she snapped at Ray without asking. "What did you do now?" It had been Ray's first lesson in inherited blame. How long, she wondered, had she been the easy one to silence the sponge to soak up tension and guilt so the others could glow? She stood and walked to the motel window. The curtain was thin and stained at the bottom, but she pulled it back anyway. The parking lot was mostly empty. A man leaned against his car smoking. A flickering light above room 3 pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Ray wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled. Not by the air, but by the truth she could no longer deny. She hadn't been seen, not really, in a long, long time. And not being seen was worse than being hated. Hate at least recognized your existence. This was like being erased in slow motion. She turned away from the window and sat back on the bed, tugging her coat tighter around her. For a long moment she stared at the phone still glowing in her hand. Her thumb hovered over the notification like it might open something buried. But it didn't. It was just data, just a timestamp, just proof of an unopened kindness. She placed the phone screen down on the side table. She didn't cry. Tears implied hope, a longing for change. This wasn't grief, not anymore. It was clarity. And for the first time in years, Ray began to feel something else settle in the quiet, not sadness, not anger. Resolve. The coffee at the funeral had tasted like cardboard, and the coleslaw was wet with too much mayonnaise. Ray remembered those things because they were the only sensations that didn't feel muted by grief. Her grandmother Lillian had passed peacefully in her sleep just shy of turning 86. She'd been the one voice in Ray's life that never needed raising to be heard. At the reception, Ray stood near the back of the church hall, her plate untouched. She wasn't avoiding people. She simply didn't expect to be approached. But someone found her. An older woman in a soft lavender coat leaned in the kind of face you remembered without ever learning the name. "Your grandmother's second letter was beautiful," she said gently. "I hope it brought you peace?" Ray turned, blinking. "Second letter." "Oh." The woman's expression faltered. "I must have been mistaken. She said she wrote you again 8 months before this." Ray shook her head. "I only received one. A few weeks before she died." The woman tilted her head, confusion knitting into her brow. "She was very proud of you, you know. She said you listened more than anyone else in the family ever had." Ray didn't know how to respond. She gave a quiet nod, and the woman patted her hand before drifting off toward the buffet line. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. The motel sheets felt rougher than usual, and the light above the mirror buzzed faintly like a dying insect. Her mind kept replaying those words, second letter. She tried to recall the tone of the letter she had received, how soft the ink looked on the thick stationery. Lillian had written in cursive that slanted upward like hope. It had talked about books, about belief, about resilience. It had ended with a line Ray now heard differently. "If you ever feel like no one is standing beside you, remember, I'm already in your corner." 8 months before she passed, Ray had been struggling. She'd lost a job, a relationship, and a piece of herself all in the same month. She'd called home and no one picked up, not even once. She wondered if her grandmother had known. 3 days after the funeral, Ray sat across from her mother at the kitchen table. The air between them was taut with the kind of silence that develops over years, not days. Ray finally asked, "Did Grandma ever send me another letter?" Marianne didn't even flinch. She left something in her will. "You got it." Before that, Ray clarified. A second letter. Around 8 months ago, Marianne shrugged, sipping her coffee like the conversation was a dull infomercial. "Just sweet old lady things. Probably got lost in the mail." Something in her tone made Ray's skin prickle. "She said you had it." Ray pressed. Marianne raised her eyes, cool and flat. "Well, if she did send one, it wasn't anything important. Just sentimental fluff. You know how she got in her final year. That was it. Dismissal again." But this time Ray didn't feel small. She didn't back down or nod in compliance. She just watched her mother and realized something far more painful than being forgotten. She hadn't been forgotten. She'd been intentionally erased. And not in one single moment, but across years. Slowly, systematically. Cropped out of family photos, left off group messages, assigned blame without presence, denied closure without words. It wasn't neglect. It was design. She left the table without another word. That was the last real conversation she ever had with her mother. Now, in the dimness of her motel room, Ray sat at the foot of the bed, knees drawn up, staring at the floral wallpaper that didn't quite meet the corners. She imagined what the second letter might have said. Maybe it held an answer, or a warning, or just a reminder that someone had truly seen her, and it had been taken, hidden, possibly destroyed. She clenched her jaw. A strange sense of steadiness settled into her chest, not quite calm but colder than rage. They hadn't just stolen her seat at the table. They'd boarded up the door and blamed her for not knocking. Ray looked at her backpack and thought of everything she'd left behind. Her teaching plans, her curriculum drafts, the notebooks stacked with ideas her family never once asked about. Maybe they hadn't burned her letters, but they had buried them. And that was enough. She stood and crossed to the desk by the window. Its faux wood surface was chipped and uneven. She pulled a page from the motel's notepad and began writing. Not a journal entry, not a letter. A map. Names, dates, moments. Instances of being silenced, overlooked, rewritten. The joke about her being the background character, the time her name was left off a birthday card signed by the family, the whispered conversation she once overheard Ray's too sensitive. Just ignore her, she'll get over it. She wouldn't forget anymore. She would document, and she would not be invisible again. Ray tapped the pen against the paper. If they won't remember me, then I will remember myself. And this time she meant it. The knock came in the late afternoon, soft but deliberate 3 times, like someone unsure whether they still had permission to knock at all. Ray opened the door to find Mila standing there. Her coat was too thin for November, and her eyes looked tired in the way only grief or betrayal could cause. In her arms was a reusable shopping bag worn at the handles and faded at the corners. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year. I didn't believe it when I heard Mila said softly, clutching the bag tighter. But then I saw this. Ray stepped aside. Mila hesitated for only a breath before entering the cramped motel room. The silence between them held a kind of reverence, like neither wanted to touch it too roughly. Mila set the bag on the chipped desk and unzipped it. From inside, she pulled out a small envelope, the kind Ray used to buy in bulk from the stationery store near the old library. My name, Ray murmured. It was written in her own handwriting, soft, careful script with rounded E's and an underline that dipped just slightly to the left. I found it in your mom's desk, Mila said almost apologetically, under a pile of expired coupons and some old church bulletins. The envelope was still sealed. Ray didn't move to take it. I wasn't snooping, Mila added quickly. I was dropping something off for Savannah. Verena had me wait, in the kitchen. The drawer was open. It was just there, like it meant nothing. Still, Ray didn't reach for it. She just stared. That letter was from last year, her mother's birthday. She'd saved for weeks to load a $50 gift card to her mom's favorite cafe. Tucked it into that envelope, along with a note about starting over. About asking not for forgiveness, but for acknowledgement. It had never been opened. Not thrown away, not returned. Just set aside. Hidden. Mila gently laid the envelope on the desk. Then wordlessly, she reached into the bag again and pulled out a folder slim but stiff with printed pages. I thought you should see this too, she said, voice quieter now. She's calling it Success Academy. She handed Ray the top page. It was a promotional flyer. Savannah's face grinned from the header, polished, bright, professional. Founder, mentor, innovator. Ray flipped the page, then another. Her breath caught. There it was, this diagnostic rubric she'd spent 6 months developing. The learning plan matrix she'd mapped out during late nights in the library. The language, her language unchanged except for a different name at the bottom of the page. Savannah's name. She used my layout, Ray said quietly. Your colors, your structure, Mila confirmed. Even the testimonials. I recognize some of those lines, they're from your old demo sessions. Ray flipped to the page with the lesson slides, her slide formatting her tone, her transitions, even her sidebars, even the font. I asked her about it. Mila continued carefully. She said you gave it to her, that you wanted her to run with it because you didn't believe in yourself enough to build it. Ray let out a small sound, too bitter to be a laugh, too hollow to be anger. She sat on the edge of the bed. The paper trembled slightly in her hand. Of all the things Ray had prepared for, indifference, silence, even cruelty, this hadn't been on the list, but maybe it should have been. Why would she do this? Ray whispered. Why take everything? Mila didn't answer. Because there was no answer, not really. Just pattern. Savannah had always taken up the oxygen in every room. Ray had learned early how to breathe in small sips. Now Savannah had taken more than space. She'd taken Ray's voice, her work, her name. Ray stood and moved to the desk, placing the flyer gently beside the unopened envelope. The two sat like bookends, one personal, one professional, both stolen, both discarded. Without a word, she opened her laptop. Her fingers didn't shake. Her breath didn't hitch. She clicked into her old folders, her cloud backup, her email drafts. She started saving things, screenshots, version histories, time-stamped files. She copied the full PDF of her original curriculum framework, the one she'd copyrighted in draft form 2 years ago and emailed to herself. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't even reaction, it was preservation, it was truth. Mila watched silently as Ray worked. I used to help you build this, she said quietly. I remember when you stayed up all night because you were afraid the color palette didn't feel welcoming enough. Ray didn't respond. She just clicked save again. This, Mila said, finally nodding toward the pile of papers, this was always yours. Ray looked up, then just for a moment. Not anymore, she said. Mila frowned. Then why are you saving it? Ray turned the laptop toward the window where the late afternoon sun filtered through the thin curtains. Because they already tried to erase me once, she said. I won't let them write the rest of the story. The storm didn't start with thunder. It started with a tweet. One former assistant. A screenshot. A caption that read, "This isn't her work." By nightfall, it had been reshared over 2,000 times. Threads unraveled beneath it. Former interns, one-time collaborators, even a freelance designer, all adding their voices. Savannah Donovan's Success Academy wasn't her idea. And now the internet had receipts. Within 24 hours, blogs picked it up. A viral headline read, Influencer or intellectual thief Savannah Donovan accused of stealing educational curriculum from unknown creator. Ray saw it while sipping her $1.50 coffee from the cafe near the bus depot. She didn't react, no smirk, no satisfaction, just a long, slow blink. Her phone buzzed 3 times that morning, then 5 more in the afternoon. By evening, the call log read Marianne, 3 Greg 2, Savannah B. Unknown, likely the house landline. 514 missed calls. No voicemails at first. Just the persistent digital knocking of people who had never come to her door when things were quiet. She didn't answer. She didn't even let the calls ring out. She just watched them light up the screen and fade again. Until finally a voicemail came through. It was her mother's voice, controlled, thinly restrained. Ray, it's getting bad. Your sister's not handling this well. She's unraveling. I know things have been tense, but you've always been the level-headed one. Please, come home. Help us manage this. Come home. Help us. Not a word about the theft, not a breath of apology, just an unspoken expectation that Ray would, as always, clean up what others had broken. A second voicemail followed, this time from her father. His tone was weary, not pleading like someone trying to solve a problem with a spreadsheet, not a soul. No, you're upset, but this is family. We can't have her reputation go up in flames, not like this. You know how people are online? Just Help us calm it down." Not a single call had come when Ray left. Not a single word when she'd been edited out of family photos, or when her letter had been buried under coupons. But now that the house was on fire, suddenly they remembered her name. She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled open the bottom drawer of the motel nightstand. There, carefully tucked beneath a travel Bible and a cracked plastic remote, was a padded envelope she hadn't opened in months. She slid out the letter from her grandmother, the one that had made it to her. The handwriting was familiar, clean slanted. Ray ran her fingers over it like braille, remembering how her grandmother used to call her the gentle one. Not because Ray was weak, but because she saw the cracks in others long before they noticed them in themselves. One day, Lillian had written, "You'll be the one holding the truth when everyone else forgets what truth looks like." She folded the letter and placed it on the desk beside her laptop. Then she reached for her old flash drive. It had sat untouched for over a year, buried under moving boxes and emotional debris. When she plugged it in, the screen glowed to life with old folders: Curriculum, Original, Rubric Draft, V3, Diagnostic Grid, Tech Map, Session Notes, RR, Her name was in every document title. The files opened slowly, each one like a memory, resurfacing her framework for individualized learning paths, her tone guides for student engagement, her resource breakdowns color-coded by need and time investment. None of it was glamorous, but all of it was hers. For a long time, Ray just sat there, eyes on the glowing screen, shoulders squared with something firmer than pain. They only called when it burned. They only remembered her when their foundation cracked, and they needed the scaffolding she'd spent years quietly building. But she wasn't their scaffolding anymore. She clicked back up and started uploading every file to a secure cloud drive. She took screenshots, zipped folders, saved timestamps, not out of bitterness, out of clarity, because truth was a kind of fire too, and it could burn quietly with precision. When the final file uploaded, Ray leaned back and let the silence settle. Outside, the wind had picked up. Inside, she wasn't shaking. She was remembering who she was, and what they'd tried to erase. The scan sat there quietly waiting in a dusty folder Ray hadn't opened in years. She hadn't been searching for it. Not exactly. She'd gone into her email archive looking for old PayPal invoices, anything to trace her original work. But buried inside a folder named Legal Plus Grandma was a single PDF. File name, Lillian Donovan Last Will Signed. PDF. Ray clicked it open. The document unfolded across her screen, inked in bold serif fonts and careful margins. Her grandmother's name, full and proper, Lillian May Donovan. And then halfway down the page, the words hit her like soft thunder. All intellectual property, curriculum frameworks, and educational materials created by or in collaboration with Ray Donovan shall be considered the sole legal and moral property of said beneficiary. She read it twice, 3 times. Then her eyes drifted to the signature at the bottom, Lillian's looping cursive, the same hand that once wrote her lullabies on birthday cards. The room stilled. Ray could almost hear her grandmother's voice echoing in the quiet "build what they can't see yet and protect it when it comes." She leaned back slowly, pressing her palms against her eyes. This wasn't just sentimental. This was binding, legal, protective. Lillian had known. Maybe not exactly what Ray would face, but she had known the family's pattern, how easy it was to make Ray the silence others walked over, how easy it was for others to claim credit for things Ray had quietly, patiently built. She hadn't just left behind words. She'd left Ray a shield. By noon the next day, Ray was in the office of Margot Ellison, a property and education rights attorney in Austin. The room was quiet, wood-paneled, filled with air that smelled like ink, old paper, and resolve. Margot was in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She read through the will without small talk. When she finished, she looked up over the top of the page. "You don't need a lawsuit to take back what's yours," she said simply. "You just need a notice." Ray blinked. "That's it." Margot tapped a red nail against the document. "This is notarized. Signed. Witnessed. You have full legal inheritance of those materials. Your sister's business is using intellectual property that doesn't belong to her, and now we can prove it. I'm not looking for revenge, Ray said. Margot smiled slightly. Good, because this isn't revenge. This is reclamation. And just like that, the process began. Ray filed as a copyright registration for her curriculum, retroactively attaching the time-stamped drafts, her original framework lesson designs, and learning rubrics, all dated long before Success Academy ever existed. Margot helped her draft an official notice of IP ownership, citing the will and detailing the scope of Ray's educational contributions. The language was careful, professional, precise. Meanwhile, Ray created a digital archive. She scanned everything: notes, sketches, draft pages, from composition books, even old text exchanges with students who had helped refine her approach. Each piece was time-stamped, cloud-backed, and triple-saved. She wasn't fighting emotionally anymore. She was documenting. She also sent a single clean email to every former student parent and tutoring contact she'd worked with in the last 5 years. In light of recent events, I'm reaffirming my authorship and ownership of the educational materials you may have interacted with under my name. Please see attached documents for reference. I remain grateful for your trust and support. The responses were quiet, but affirming. You helped my daughter pass the SAT after we almost gave up. Your curriculum is the reason my son didn't drop out. Always knew your approach was different. Now I know why. She didn't cry, not because it didn't matter, but because it did. The power wasn't in being loud. It was in being undeniable. By the end of the week, Ray had completed what most people never even begin. She didn't just claim her work. She made it legally real, immutable, recognized. And still, there was no call from her family acknowledging what she'd done. Just silence. Savannah hadn't responded publicly to the growing accusations online, but Ray noticed the shift her sister's posting schedule slowed. Comments on her videos began to turn. Brands pulled back on collaborations. And still, Ray said nothing. She didn't have to. Her name was now attached to the work, and this time it wasn't invisible. She took the printed copy of Lillian's will and pinned it to the corkboard above her motel desk. Next to it, she taped a thank you note from a student named Riley, the one who once said, "You're the only one who made this make sense." One was written in legalese, the other in the wide handwriting of a teenager, but both said the same thing. You mattered. You made something real. And someone saw it. That night, Ray didn't work. She didn't reply to emails. She poured herself a cup of tea hot this time and sat by the window watching the streetlight flicker onto the concrete. She wasn't waiting for a call. She wasn't wondering if she'd been forgiven. She had stopped needing that, because her grandmother hadn't just given her words. She'd given her back her name. The knock on her motel door came just after dusk, 3 slow raps. Not aggressive, not timid, practiced. Ray rose without urgency, the weight of the moment already heavy in the air. She looked through the peephole and felt her breath still. Marianne, Greg, Savannah, all standing there in the hallway like a broken monument cracks, showing pride slipping but still unable to crumble properly. She opened the door but didn't step aside. Marianne looked tired, her lipstick faded at the edges. Greg's hands were jammed into his coat pockets, eyes downcast. Savannah's carefully curated appearance was unraveling hair too neat to be accidental eyeliner smudged like she'd tried to cry and look good doing it. No one spoke first, so Ray did. This isn't your house. You don't get to wait inside. Marianne nodded as if expecting it. We came to talk, then talk. The hallway light buzzed above them. Marianne's voice was quiet, diplomatic years of PTA meetings and church boardrooms baked into her tone. We know things have gone too far, and maybe we should have listened earlier. We just didn't realize how much you were hurting. Ray said nothing. Greg cleared his throat. Your sister's struggling, everything's falling apart. Still nothing. Savannah finally spoke. I never meant to steal it, she blinked hard. I didn't think you'd use it. There it was, the truth delivered like an afterthought. I'm sorry if I hurt you, Marianne added quickly, like she could edit the script in real time. That was never our intention. Ray let the silence hang just long enough for discomfort to settle. You didn't come here to apologize, she said calmly. You came because your house is on fire. And you think I still have a bucket. Marianne flinched ever so slightly. I'm not the one who started it, Ray continued, and I won't be the one cleaning up the ashes. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. Savannah looked down. I'm not angry, Ray said softer now. I'm awake. She didn't slam the door. She simply closed it with quiet finality. The click echoed louder than shouting ever could. Inside, Ray poured herself a cup of peppermint tea. She didn't shake. Her hands were steady, her heart quiet. But the next blow came the very next morning. Your website has been flagged and temporarily suspended due to a copyright violation. The banner was bold, red, stark. She clicked through. Someone an anonymous IP address had filed a claim against her platform. The details were vague but strategic. The claim targeted core files, even using portions of Ray's original phrasing against her. Her hands didn't tremble. She picked up her phone and called Margot. It's them, she said, no need for context. An hour later, Margot called back. It traces to the agency Savannah used for her branding, she confirmed. They're trying to bury you with paperwork now. Ray stared at the wall. Her corkboard of proof. Her grandmother's will. The student testimonials. Her printed lesson plans. So this was the next tactic. If they couldn't erase her in silence, they'd drown her in noise. She didn't panic. She opened her files, retrieved time-stamped documents, screenshots, even her original drafts saved in a backup drive from 3 years ago. She wrote a response, not bitter, not panicked, just measured. Then she sent a public email to her professional network, past clients, and supporters. Subject: clarification and documentation. In light of recent confusion, please find attached my original course materials, timestamps, development drafts, and verified legal ownership of the content. Thank you for your continued trust. She signed it simply, Ray Donovan, founder, author, educator. Then she posted a statement on her socials, I don't shout, I document. When you've been silent long enough, the truth doesn't need a stage. It just needs clarity. By sunset, her inbox had already filled. Parents responded first. We used your curriculum. We stand with you. No one explains this material the way you do. Please don't stop. Then came colleagues, former tutors, counselors, even a professor from a small college Ray once guest lectured at. One message simply said, truth will always outlive performance. Keep going. That night, Ray added a new pin to her wall, a screenshot of her email archive one with the earliest draft of her curriculum sent to herself 3 years prior. Next to it, she wrote in pen, this isn't about noise, it's about proof. Let them try silence. She had a voice now, and this time it had weight. The setup was simple. No lights, no filters, no carefully staged backdrop. Just Ray sitting at the plain desk in her small studio apartment, a neutral wall behind her and the soft afternoon light spilling in from the window. Her laptop camera blinked to life. The red light came on. She didn't rehearse. She didn't script. She just began. My name is Ray Donovan, she said, voice calm. And this is the truth. She reached beside her, lifted a sheet of paper into view. This is my grandmother's will, she continued. Dated, signed, notarized. It states that all educational materials, curriculum designs, and collaborative projects between myself and Lillian Donovan are my intellectual property. Solely and legally. She placed the page down and clicked to screen share. This, she said, is the original draft of my diagnostic rubric created 3 years ago. Here's the timestamp. Here's the email I sent to myself that day. She clicked again. This is the same rubric used on the Success Academy website under my sister's name. Notice the language. The color coding. Even the side notes identical, except for one thing. She paused. My name isn't on it. She continued old session plans, annotated PDFs, comparison screenshots. each piece laid out without embellishment, without venom. Just order, just proof. "I've been silent for a long time," she said, "because I thought being quiet made me easy to love. Or at least less difficult to leave behind," leaned in slightly. "But silence isn't a virtue when it becomes complicity. And I will no longer be complicit in my own erasure." Ray clicked stop recording, then she uploaded the video. She didn't add music, no dramatic caption, no tags begging for reach, just "for the record." And her name. The first hour passed quietly. A few views, a couple of reshares from former students. By the second hour, it had cracked 1,000. By the third, it was on fire. A teacher from a local community college commented Ray guest lectured at my class 3 years ago. This is her work. No doubt. A single mother reposted the clip with a caption, "She helped my daughter pass the GED. We never forgot her." And then came the flood. Tweets, TikToks, YouTube stitches, posts on Reddit and Medium. Ray's name trending alongside hashtags like #CurriculumGate and #Donovan deserved credit. Even the quiet ones came out. Students Ray barely remembered messaged her. "You believed in me when no one else did. You explained things in ways that made me feel smart for the first time." The noise Ray had always been afraid of was now building a wave beneath her. It wasn't a tidal wave of fame. It was something slower, deeper. It was recognition. That night, Savannah posted a cryptic tweet clearly meant to shift the story. "Funny how people love to ride your hard work once it starts getting attention. Jealousy always finds a way to scream. No names, but everyone knew, and this time no one was buying it." The comments under her tweet turned quickly, "Girl, she literally showed us the receipts." Really showed. "You copied. She proved it. Take the L. You built a platform with someone else's bricks, and now you're mad she put her name back on them." Even former fans of Savannah's began tagging Ray in support, resharing her video with the phrase, "This woman deserves to be heard." Some asked if Ray planned to sue. Some begged for interviews. A podcast offered her a guest slot. A nonprofit for women in education wanted to partner. Ray didn't respond to most of them. She sat in her small kitchen that night, tea steaming quietly beside her laptop, aglow with the video still playing on loop. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt seen, and that was enough. Later, she scrolled back to the first draft of her curriculum, not to edit it, but just to look. Her initials in the footer, her notes in the margin, her late-night corrections still dated by the automatic save feature. She thought about all the years she'd spent convincing herself that if she just stayed quiet, good things would eventually find her. But the truth didn't wait for permission. It wasn't a guest. It didn't knock softly. It entered when the door stayed closed too long. At midnight, Ray refreshed the video one last time, 500,000 views. She turned off the lights. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't worried about being loud. Because what she had said wasn't noise. It was proof. The envelope arrived with an official seal and a thin layer of desperation. Ray recognized the firm's logo, Savannah's legal representation. Inside was a neatly folded agreement printed on heavy cream-colored paper, as if expensive stationery could soften the blow. Non-disclosure agreement. Settlement offer 6 figures. Full IP acknowledgement. In exchange for silence. She sat at her desk, the late autumn sun filtering through the window. The words didn't sting. Not anymore. They didn't even tempt. This was never about money. This was about being named, about being seen. Her eyes drifted to the corkboard above her desk. There were only 3 things pinned there. First, the notarized copy of her grandmother Lillian's will, creased at the corners from being read so many times. Ray had highlighted the key clause in soft yellow, sole legal and moral beneficiary of all educational work. Second, a note handwritten in red ink from a student named Riley. Ray had tutored her for only 4 sessions, but in the final one, the girl had whispered, "You're the only person who talks to me like I'm not dumb." The letter ended simply, "You made me believe I could matter, and third slightly faded from sunlight exposure was the unopened envelope Ray had once sent to her mother, the one with the silk handkerchief and the letter that had never been read. A full circle of love given, ignored, and reclaimed. Ray looked back at the settlement papers. The number was real, the strings even more so. Delete the video. Withdraw your claims. Never speak of this again. Silence as currency. Silence as closure. She ran her fingers along the edge of the contract, then slowly stood and walked it over to the shredder. The machine hummed to life. The pages disappeared in clean, crisscrossed strips. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like truth multiplied. That afternoon, Ray updated her website. A single new tab appeared at the top, the Lillian May Donovan Scholarship. It wasn't massive. Just enough to offer 3 high school students a year-long mentorship and $1,000 toward college or certification programs. It came with tutoring application help and, most importantly, someone who believed in them, not someone who gave permission, someone who showed up. Applications opened quietly. No press release, no viral campaign, just a soft announcement posted under the same header Ray had carried in her heart for years. You will build what no one sees today. That night, Ray packed a small envelope, no return address. Inside, she folded a single note onto thick, stationery paper. You are not too loud. You are not too much. You are not wrong for dreaming big in a house that gave you small rooms. You will build what no one sees today. And one day they'll wish they had seen it sooner. She mailed it to a girl named Amaya, a student she'd once mentored, quiet, brilliant, but crushed under the weight of a family that only praised obedience. Ray had seen the dimming in her eyes, the questions she never quite asked, the notebook full of ideas she always hesitated to share. Ray didn't sign the letter. She didn't need to. Sometimes the right words from a stranger or a ghost were louder than the ones family never spoke. In the weeks that followed, Savannah's website quietly shut down. The brand partnerships dissolved. Ray didn't gloat. She didn't tweet. She simply returned to her work. By winter, Ray had moved into a small townhouse near a local library. It had 2 rooms, one she used for tutoring, the other for living. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have a view. But the door locked from the inside, and every chair inside it had been chosen by her. One afternoon, while cleaning, Ray opened an old folder and found something she hadn't expected, a sticky note in her own handwriting scrawled years ago and tucked between early drafts. You don't have to be seen by them to be real. She smiled and tacked it next to the corkboard. For the first time in a long time, she felt no ache when she thought of her family. No need for them to understand, to change, to reach out. They had their story. She had hers. And hers was still being written with her name on every page.